People who are ghosting other people. Have you ever been called out? If so, how did that make you feel? When I was a teenager I did ghost. I was deeply insecure and terrified of hurting people. The irony is I probably hurt more by ghosting. I'd spent hours and days trying to think of how to reject them until I've convinced myself it was too late, or they were calling me out. Usually pretty aggressively, which I got even terrified of. If they were nice about it I'd understand, okay, I'm being even more horrible, and finally write that text I'd been dreading. As older, I've also ghosted in a way, but more like I uninstall Tinder, use it a couple of days, and then life gets stressful and I honestly forget to use it. Then I go back on it after a few months. Some of the time I see some old messages about people being pretty upset, understandably, and I feel bad. I had to ghost a few people when I quit drinking. My health matters, and I DGAF about you whining, well you're no fun anymore. Bye bye. I ghosted an ex-boss friend. She was the reason I worked very hard some days because she would pull her own friends from work, leaving me with extra. She would be combative during barbecues and I just didn't like the person I was when talking with her. I realized the question is about being called out. I wasn't called out per se, but her consistent messages asking me what was wrong ceased after a few weeks. I felt bad about not replying, but I felt it was easier to move on instead of feeling like I'd verbally attack her for being a bad friend, bad boss. I ghosted a friend once because the relationship was getting too toxic and I wasn't mature enough at the time to have an adult conversation. But we still went to the same university and had the same major. It was like a game to me that semester of going to my classes in the most circuitous ways and doing everything I could to avoid her. Then one day, I randomly ran into her on next to the escalators going down a building, and we just looked at each other for a second. She started to say he, and before she could even get the word out I just sprinted down the stairs. Except they were elevators, escalators, and I forgot and I tripped, twisted my ankle to the point where I tore some tendons and ligaments, couldn't walk on my foot at all, and needed to be half carried to the doctor. And because it was after hours, literally no one was there except my ex-friend. I was basically stuck with her for hours because she took me to the ER and stayed with me. Stuck with the person I had ghosted for almost 2 semesters and literally ran away from instead of have a 2-minute conversation. Anyway, we're happily married now for 7 years, so I'm glad I ran into her. I had a guy ghost me 2 years ago. We had been dating 3 months, saw each 3-4 times a week, met friends, etc. He just dropped off the face of the earth and I was too stubborn to chase him, so I dropped it and moved on. 5 months later he hits me up with, "My sister still talks about you and how you're the best girlfriend I ever had." Tee. I'm petty, so I told him I hope he never gets another girl like me because you're freaking coward and a loser. Felt good. Frick him. I dated a guy for a year, thought things were going well, and then one day he just stopped talking to me. He blocked me through every possible form of communication. 5 months later I got a text in the middle of the night saying how sorry he was. He couldn't believe he let me go, and was there ever a possibility we could get back together? I, being the petty, terrible grudge-holding person that I am, agreed, on my terms. I told him I wanted to take things slowly, so I didn't see him in person again. But, for about 3 weeks, I led him on through texts and phone calls, and then I did the exact same thing that he did to me. I blocked him through every possible means in which he might contact me, and never spoke to him again. Part of me wants to feel bad about what I did, but honestly, I have no regrets at all. Maybe that makes me a bad person. But after over a year of giving my all to someone to just have my heart completely ripped out with no explanation, I figured 3 weeks of hope and getting a taste of his own medicine was little penance for him to pay. Power move. I was ghosted hard. 8-month relationship. Just never came back to my house for his stuff. Not a ton. Or called me back after promising me he would. Broke my heart. Still had to see his mom at work for months afterwards too. Few months later someone who saw his social media told he had announced a pregnancy, and the timeline added up to when he ghosted me. I guess he thought he was doing the right thing by that girl, but I was really shattered from that. I don't date much, but I took a chance and went on a walk with a woman I met on Bumble. It didn't spark anything for me, so I took the evening to think about it and texted her in the morning to say I had a nice time but didn't find what I was looking for, and good luck to her. For the next 2 days I was inundated with well there goes another one and I get it but this keeps happening to me and poof there he goes. Just gone. This was after one walk, and the texts kept up for multiple days. I never sent another message after one. I was pretty surprised with how entitled she was acting. I have never and will never ghost anyone, but I get why people do it. Some people just can't act like adults if their life depends on it. I ghost my friends all the time. I don't know why. I like talking to them. I just don't have the energy for myself most of the time, let alone someone else. I've been friends with them for years, so they're familiar with depression. But I still feel bad when I get a text and instead decide to sleep all day. I ghosted a guy I had been dating for a few months when I was in my early 20s, after he drunkenly peed in my closet one night because he thought it was the bathroom, or so he claimed. He just never answered any more of his calls or messages. I finally did pick up the phone one night about 2 weeks later, and he was drunk again and crying about how much of a b I was for not communicating. As if I had to spell out for him that it was unacceptable for him to pee all over my things and then be too hungover the next day to help me clean it up. As if I owed him jack crap after that. I didn't feel bad about it at all, if that wasn't clear. Anyway, I told him to get some help for his drinking and lose my number. Oh gosh, the early 20s boy you date who isn't an alcoholic. Woke up to mine pee on my laptop back in the day. To be honest, it made me feel like I made the right decision. I told him that I was upset and didn't want to talk for a while because he wouldn't respect my boundaries and then tried to convince me otherwise by disregarding my wishes yet again. Don't really regret that at all. I ghosted a guy after he physically held me down and tried to prevent me from leaving his house. Upon confrontation about my ghosting him, I ghosted him. Frick that guy. He didn't deserve a second more of my time. Awkward. I used to have a friend that became a bit too much for me to handle. He was constantly getting into stupid dramas with others, would make dramatic posts on social media, and had a nasty habit of interrupting others while they were talking. The final straw for me was when I learned he was spreading a rumor that my best friend was cheating on her abusive boyfriend that she dumped. He tried to reach out recently, and I just didn't even bother replying. I don't regret it. My girlfriend who I'd been dating for 3 years and was living with ghosted me while we were living together. She would ignore my texts and calls and get home when she knew I'd be asleep. I tried so hard to stay up for when she gets home, but I get up at 5 and she'd get home at 4. So I fell asleep every time by like 2-3 am. I tried writing notes and calling her but she wouldn't hear me. I offered to leave for the weekend to get our heads straight, thinking I would come back home. And the only thing she ever told me is not to come back. She just found someone better. This happened last month. I don't like it, but I guess things happen that way. I think the emotional horrificness of this one is a little understated. You literally got physically ghosted in your own home. I ghosted my now GF when we first started dating. I had extremely low self-esteem due to a toxic past relationship and couldn't fathom that someone as amazing as my GF liked me. I thought I was doing her a favor when I stopped messaging her, and she never really reached out after anyways. Fast forward like 8 months and I realize what an idiot I am and finally get the courage to text her again. We went out on another date and now we've been together for almost 2 years. She likes to bring it up to poke fun at me, but it really hits a nerve and I feel guilty about it to this day. I never meant to be malicious, I just wasn't in the right space. I was ghosting this Victorian chick for a few years until she had the nerve to go and call a priest and get me exorcised. Never felt so betrayed in my life, or after it. There's a few people I don't enjoy talking to that much. It's nice to write a few text messages once or twice a day, but I don't enjoy chatting with them for hours. And a few people regularly call me out for it. I've seen you online. Why won't you answer? It's getting on my nerves. Don't force me to be your best friend. I don't want to and I will answer in a few hours. I feel like in the dating app world the term ghosting is way overused. I'm not ghosting you, I'm just not interested in having to strike up every conversation all the time for 1-2 word answers. I hate getting ghosted by people who say I'll talk to you later, I'll be back, we'll see each other soon. Sucker, just say it's over, or just ghost out of nowhere BC, at least then I'll forget about you, because now I'm expecting you to text me out of the blue, months, and even years later. Frick my memories and their random appearances. People who don't understand what ghosting is. Cutting communication with someone who turned out to be weird, creepy, abusive, who you didn't even really have a relationship with to begin with isn't ghosting. Ghosting is dating someone or being friends with someone for an extended period then just disappearing. You're stopping communication with someone you met on Tinder a week ago because they said something weird isn't ghosting. I stop talking to people on dating apps when the conversation fizzles out pretty regularly. I don't consider it ghosting, but I have friends that do. Had a guy who on the second date brought me back to his place, and when I didn't want to frick, because I was on my period, he said, "You're lucky I'm such a nice guy." I got him to clarify and he absolutely meant or I'd violate you. I safely got out of that situation as fast as I could, but later I was fuming to my friend and said I was just going to ghost him. My friend said he thinks you should never ghost anyone. I felt pretty awful and angry that ghosting has become so antagonized that my friend thought a man like that deserved a proper goodbye. Honestly, I've been ghosted and it's real low on my crappy things people have done to me list. My friend asked me why I don't talk with a mutual friend of ours, and I told her that it was draining to be around them. She told me that I was being unreasonable and that I should talk to them again because they want to. Honestly, I didn't really feel much of anything except for annoyance at her. I have a really hard time with empathy sometimes, and I couldn't really understand what it would feel like to be in their shoes. I kind of brushed her off and told her that I'd talk to them again if I ever felt like it. I'm going to be honest and let the downvotes roll in, I guess. I have some emotional issues due in part to child abuse and other victimizations throughout my life, and I ghost people a lot. I'm currently alone, except for my husband and kids, because I do it so much. I do it for the following reasons. 1. People in general make me uneasy, so I avoid them. 2. For whatever reason, I have trouble maintaining emotional engagement with people. That is, I just stop caring enough to respond. I don't know why this happens. 3. There are people who need to be out of my life because they are toxic, and I don't feel strong enough to force them out. I don't want to hurt people, but I know I'll ghost them because of reasons 1 and 2. I have been called out quite a bit about it. If the person is referring to situation 1 or 2, I feel terrible, which reinforces the decision to avoid people in order to avoid hurting them further. If they're referring to situation 3, I don't feel bad at all and feel slightly angry. I refuse to admit any of those reasons to the person either. I'd rather make up an absurd lie of why I'm busy than explain any of it. I've been ghosted once by a guy who in retrospect was seeing another girl, and clearly didn't have the balls to tell me. I think if you decide a person isn't for you, at least have the decency to say so. But in my case, I can now see the guy was a complete dong anyway, so it wasn't really surprising. But I dodged a train wreck with that one, so I'm glad he fecked off. I ghost people a lot because my anxiety makes me overwhelmed with digital conversations super easily. My friend called me out once and it truly made me feel like an butthole, but I knew I deserved it, and ultimately I'm only hurting myself by cutting people off. Not exactly ghosting, but after high school this friend of mine and I drifted away. It took me 1 year to find his whereabouts and his number. I call him all excited and the first thing he says, in the rudest tone ever, "Wow, took you long enough to find me. What kind of trash friend are you?" And he cut the call. I only have one word for this: bruh. I ghost people almost every time I get a text. I also have ADHD. It makes me feel incredibly guilty and is, in the vast majority of cases, absolutely unintentional. As far as my mindset goes, I usually think something along the lines of "I'll respond once I'm finished, current task," and then I write down a reminder to respond. I will frequently either forget to check the reminder, or push it off for so long, 24+ hours for responding to a casual text from a friend, that I feel too guilty and anxious to respond. so I push it off further. It becomes a vicious cycle, and it makes having social relationships really difficult. This is compounded when the response that I have to write involves looking up some kind of information or coordinating plans. Like if someone asks if I want to meet somewhere and they ask what time. There are then two barriers I have to overcome to respond. Figuring out when and where I can meet, and communicating that information to them. Responding to a text or an email may seem basic for a lot of people, but it becomes really debilitating, and I have a reputation as someone who doesn't respond. I am called out all the time for this and I feel bad for it. I have lost friendships and opportunities over this. That being said, taking my medication makes it 100x easier for me to respond to a text. If I have taken my medication and I get a text, it feels like the mental barrier of how much effort it takes to respond has been lowered. I was the ghoster in this case. I know. Not cool. Basically had been messaging a girl for a while. She was a customer at a place I used to drive deliveries for. Things had been going good. We chatted most days. Then out of the blue, I met my current GF. It wasn't like I made a conscious decision to never message this girl again. I just got so wrapped up after meeting this amazing woman that before I knew it, it had been over a week and I just hadn't messaged her back. Months went by, until one day, I looked at my delivery schedule and there she was. I felt horrible. When I got to her house, things were kind of awkward for a minute, until I decided to try and break the ice a bit. I said, well, I think I owe you an apology. She laughed and said it was fine. She'd seen on Facebook that I'd met someone and seemed happy, so she'd figured out what had gone on. All round really decent about it. Still bump into her from time to time. She's met someone now and also seems really happy. All things considered, I'd say that was pretty much the perfect ending. I'm ghosting my narc mother. Loads of people trying to get me to talk to her. Frick that. I'm done with her crap. Been so much happier without her. I have extremely horrible social anxiety and, right now, it manifests as a fear of opening messages and activating the read notification. That would mean I have to reply. That would mean using my brain. My brain doesn't work anymore. Next thing I know, days turn to weeks and weeks turn to months. I didn't mean for this to happen, but alas. Though I haven't been called out, I don't really have influence on people's lives. I don't have much to offer, so nobody noticed I've dropped out of existence anyway. I ghosted the last guy I was kind of seeing before I met my fiance. To be fair, I had already explained very nicely 3 or 4 times that he was consistently crossing boundaries, and yet he would continue to cross them. In the end, he was a really good guy, but he either didn't understand or didn't care why I needed to take things slow, and I was sick of trying to explain it to him just to be put in an uncomfortable situation later. If you call out someone who ghosts you, isn't she going to keep on ghosting you? I don't see how they would make them feel differently. I'm currently engaged with my partner of 5 years, and recently reconnected with an old friend over Facebook. Immediately the old friend in question started asking me very uncomfortable details about my relationship with my fiance. I told her I wasn't comfortable disclosing anything that personal. Her and I weren't ever close friends. Basically friendly acquaintances, if you will. One night she calls me in a panic. She's attempted to take her life by overdosing on some medication. I can't do anything as she lives a few states over, so I call her mom instead. Finally, after a good while, she gets back to me. Has been in a mental ward for quite some time. Eventually, over the course of a couple of months, she starts subtly dropping hints she tried to kill herself because I'm a bad friend for not dating her. I'm going to cut this story a bit short as she raised giant red flags every time we spoke. Anyhow, a few days prior to me ghosting her, she told me she had met a guy on some RPG game, and that they were going to get married on there, and asked if I was okay with that. I told her immediately she doesn't need to ask me that. I'm not emotionally or physically interested in her at all. Hush, I know, but as I said, I'm engaged to my very beautiful fiance. When I say she snapped, I mean she snapped. She sent me threatening emails about going to kill herself. How I should just be with her instead. I owe her that for her being so kind to me. I never vented to her or asked her for anything, so I abruptly screenshotted the messages, blocked her, and sent the messages to her mother. Her mom was compassionate and understanding about the whole thing. The worst part is, this woman is 29 years old and acts like a spoiled child. She tried to contact me on and off for a while. I just blocked the fake accounts and didn't read the messages. Guys, it's been a month and a half. You have no idea the relief that I feel. So yes, I ghosted someone, and I don't feel a drop of guilt for it. TLDR, crazy old friend contacts me on Facebook, stalks and harasses me, tries to convince me to leave fiance, then threatens suicide. I ghost. Truly, ghosting someone is a cowardly act and exercise in avoidance behavior. If you actually made it clear that you aren't interested and then you cease contact, you aren't ghosting. You are just moving on. While you are in no way obligated to talk to anyone ever, most people on the planet deserve some basic amount of communication instead of just a disappearing act. If you are the one being ghosted, realize you won't get a reason and forget about it. That person doesn't respect you enough to deserve your time. If you are a weirdo, well, you'll probably never realize it or care about this post anyway. So my ex-boyfriend of 6 years ghosted me out of the blue. No, I did not cheat on him. I said frick it, deleted his number, blocked him on everything, and never reached out to him or spoke to him again. If he was going to disrespect me like that after years together, then frick you. You don't deserve me. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.